Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into an ancient text, Nehemiah chapter 2, to really explore the agonizing process of waiting and, more importantly, how to faithfully handle the silence. If you've ever felt stuck in a holding pattern, well, this story is absolutely for you.
So let me ask you a really piercing, deeply modern question. What exactly happens when your earnest prayers for a job, a spouse, or just a major life breakthrough are met with absolute deafening silence? It's honestly one of the most universally frustrating human experiences, right? You ask, you plead, and literally nothing happens. Let's see how this incredible piece of ancient history addresses that exact universal struggle.
All right, let's look at phase 1, the closed door and the absolute agony of waiting. So, Nehemiah has just received some devastating news. His ancestral home, Jerusalem, is in absolute ruins. The gates are burned, the walls are down, and he is heartbroken. He weeps, he fasts, and he prays. But here's the kicker. The response doesn't come immediately. In fact, there is a painful 4-month gap between his initial prayer in the month of Kislev, which is around November or December, and the very next event in the month of Nisan, around March or April. For 4 whole months, the text records absolutely nothing. Can you imagine the doubt creeping in? Why is there no answer? Is anyone even listening?
Now, what's really fascinating here is the stark contrast between our natural human reactions and what Nehemiah actually did. I mean, while our instinct during a long wait tells us to just quit, complain to anyone who will listen, or try to forcefully rush ahead and make things happen ourselves, Nehemiah did something remarkably grounded. He just went to work. He faithfully continued his secular day job as the king's cupbearer without losing hope. He didn't abandon his responsibilities just because he was stuck in a spiritual waiting room. He just stayed faithful.
Which brings us to phase 2, the opening door. And trust me, this is a high-stakes moment.
Suddenly, after those 4 months of silence, the door finally cracks open. But this isn't some casual, easy moment. It comes with intense, life-threatening stakes. King Artaxerxes notices Nehemiah's sad face and points it out, saying, "This is nothing but sadness of the heart." Now, to our modern ears, a boss asking why you look sad might just seem polite, but in the context of the ancient Persian court, this was terrifying. The king represented the glory of the entire empire, and court etiquette demanded that servants appear joyful in his presence. Looking sad before the king was seen as an insult. It was a punishable offense that could easily cost you your life. So yeah, no wonder the text says Nehemiah was very much afraid.
The tension here is off the charts. The king asks him, "What are you requesting?" With his life literally on the line, Nehemiah has mere seconds to respond. And his immediate reaction? "So I prayed to the God of heaven." It's this split-second internal prayer before he even opens his mouth to speak to the most powerful man in the world.
I like to think of this as the badminton reaction. If you've ever watched professional badminton players, they have this lightning-fast startup step. They react to a 200-mile-per-hour smash in fractions of a second. But that isn't panic, right? It's an instant, instinctive reflex built on years of repetitive training. Well, Nehemiah's split-second prayer was exactly like that. It was pure spiritual muscle memory. He couldn't exactly drop to his knees for an hour. He had milliseconds. But because he had spent 4 solid months practicing the presence of God during the silence, his reflex was perfectly tuned.
And here is a massive takeaway for us. Prayer is not a substitute for planning. It's the foundation of it. Some people might think that relying entirely on faith means you just wing it when the opportunity finally comes, but the exact opposite is true here. Because Nehemiah spent 4 months praying in that waiting room, he was simultaneously planning. He wasn't caught off guard at all when the king finally asked what he wanted.
Just look at how ridiculously prepared this guy was. He quickly fires off a highly specific list of requests. He asks for a timeline for his leave of absence. He asks for official royal letters for safe passage through hostile territories. He even asks for a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, for very specific timber to make beams for the fortress gates, the city wall, and his own house. He used every single day of that 4-month silence to meticulously prepare for this exact open door. He knew exactly what he needed. And the really incredible part? The king granted all of his requests, and even threw in an official military escort of army officers and horsemen.
Now for phase 3, the guarded door and facing the opposition.
You'd think that with the king's blessing and God's favor, it would be smooth sailing from here on out, right? Wrong. Enter our villains. Right as Nehemiah arrives with all his official letters and his military escort, we meet Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official. The text says it displeased them greatly that someone had come to help Israel. What's crazy here is that Nehemiah hasn't even done anything to them personally. He literally just showed up to do something good, and they are absolutely furious.
This is a huge counterintuitive reality check about spiritual warfare. A lot of times, we just assume that if things get really hard, we must have taken a wrong turn somewhere. But facing immediate, intense opposition doesn't mean you made a mistake. Actually, scratch that, it usually means you are exactly in the center of God's will. Opposition is just the inevitable resistance you face when you start actively building something meaningful. Nehemiah had an open door, for sure, but it was heavily guarded by opposition.
As we wrap up this whole picture, we have to recognize a really beautiful twist. You might read this history and think, wow, Nehemiah is just an incredibly brave, highly organized guy. But the main character of this story isn't actually Nehemiah. It's the God who perfectly controls the timeline. He's the one who kept the door closed for 4 months to prepare Nehemiah. He's the one who opened the door in the king's palace in a single day. And he is the one who ultimately provides the grace to face that fierce opposition at the guarded door.
So I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to carry with you today. Look, we all face periods of silence in our lives. We all have doors we are desperately praying will open. But the real question isn't just when the door will open. It's about who you will be in the meantime. When you are forced to wait, will you continue to be faithful in your everyday responsibilities? Will you keep planning? And will you keep praying, refining those reflexes until that door finally opens? Think about that.